Alrighty, I want to welcome everybody back to another video that I'm doing. This one I wanted to go into some of the Wi-Fi. I know I have a video that's a rough definition of Wi-Fi, internet. I have a lot of videos on how to actually set up a network, how to secure the network, the security, a lot of other things out there already. But there's always one thing that if you look on the internet, and they've always kind of say verses. It's not really a verse. You have your Wi-Fi, you have your 2.4, and you have your 5G network. It's not really a versus. The new modern devices actually can use both networks. There are pros and cons to each one of those, the 2.4 and the 5. The biggest one there is, I wouldn't even say speed, because if you get into the newer NAC type speeds, they're very quick. I can't give you an exact number because everyone I look at seems to have a different range. It's between like 100 meg to 300 meg, 600 meg, they vary due to what product it is, who makes it, what it is. So it's hard to give you the hard numbers on that because there really isn't any. But the difference is once you get over your internet speed that you have in your house, unless you're doing a media sharing or something internal in your house, you're not really going to benefit from that if you're going on the internet. There are some other benefits, like I said, if you're doing internal stuff, if you have an internal server and that type of stuff, that you can go look at all the other videos to go through all of those type of setups. But if you're sitting on an older piece of technology, like a Wi-Fi B, you may want to go out and get yourself an N. There's a reason why. It's because of the bandwidth speed. Now, if you're running an older laptop and it's only got a B card in it and you only have a B router, okay, that's acceptable. You don't really need to upgrade because it's not going to be faster because of what's in the computer. But a lot of people have stuck with their older routers and their older things because they're still working, they're still functioning and all that. I'm not telling you to go out and run out to a store and buy a brand new one now. Most of the stuff I've bought and I have videos on that I've talked about before, that I've bought at thrift stores. Because people went out and bought mesh networks, people went out and bought Wi-Fi 6, people went out and bought AC when it was brand new, and they gave away all their old stuff. I have people that say, oh, I got this and that, and it's a little slow, and I talk to them, I find out what their computer is, do a little research on it, find out what their speed is on that laptop or whatever they're using, whatever those devices are they're using. And then I'll make the determination. Well, if you have things, you bought all new devices, you bought new Fire Sticks or media devices or sharing devices, you bought all this stuff within the last year or two that have a quicker speed, it might be worth going to a quicker speed router. As long as all your devices support it. It's really worth it if you go into a thrift store and you come across it and you see it for $5 or $10, $20. That's a great deal. You pick that up, go home, do a factory reset on it. You can go on to the manufacturer's website of that device. They'll tell you how to do the factory reset. They'll tell you all that stuff, the default passwords and all of that stuff. You can set it up. It's really not that difficult. Have videos, got more videos coming about the security features and all these other things that are also available on the newer devices. So it is a benefit to get a newer device. But it's hard for me to recommend to someone to go out and pay hundreds of dollars to get that newer device. So there's a variable there. It's newer to you and it benefits you, but it may not be a new device. Because if you're running an old B or A, from the 90s, it's pretty an old device. So if you got a device that's a few years old, it's probably going to last as long as the one you've had. So that's a consideration to think about. But you're not paying that kind of money. So that's one of the considerations that I always have to bring into it when I suggest this to someone. Sometimes I may have them here that I picked up for 10 bucks and I'll sell it to them for 10 bucks or whatever, and it goes on to a good home and it gets used, or I can figure it and hand it off to them. So, there's a benefit to that. So as a home user, even as a business, if you're running a business, it may be a small little mom and pop business or whatever you're doing, that you might not have the money to invest in that kind of architecture or structure of your network. So as long as you wipe it clean, do a factory default, make sure all the settings are wiped out, make sure there's no admin remote logins or anything like that, you're okay. That's why you do the factory default. Then you go in and you set it up the way you need to. Go through all the other videos I've done. I've told you about changing the admin login password, all those other features that would make that device okay. Go back and watch all those security ones that I've posted. These are why I post these videos, because they're all interchangeable. All these little pieces that I've talked about in all these other videos now come into play when you do something like this. These are why I keep pushing these out there so people understand. This is all like a domino effect. This is what makes the IT field and the technical field so technical and so hard. It's not that, I just need to run a network cable from here and dig a hole and run it down and terminate and put it over here. It's not just that. Once you connect that cable, you have hardware and you have software and you have, permissions and you have rights and you have denials and you have all kinds of other things that come into place. So I brought up a lot of terms just now. A lot of these terms will be covered in future videos, and probably a lot of them have already been covered in past videos. So these are all your security permissions, all of this other stuff that you need to know. All these things come into play. They're really not hard subjects, but they're hard to comprehend and understand it in a way that you could truly understand it to relay it to what you're doing. And that's what I'm trying to express, trying to get everybody to understand, is how these things all are. They're not really that complicated. You just got to slow down, pay attention. A lot of times they'll tell you a definition of what it is, or you can look up, it'll say help on it or whatever, and you can see what it is. So you can get a rougher definition of what they're asking you. But back to the Wi-Fi. This is why a lot of people, like I brought up, I mentioned in some videos, I put a questionnaire out. I wanted to know, what's everybody's internet speed? Because it really surprised me how many routers and how many things I found out in thrift stores and all that when the mesh network came out, and then the Wi-Fi 6 network came out. Everybody was buying and buying and buying, and I'm like, wow, why? The AC one I bought that I have in the house that has media sharing and all these great features. This is an expensive router I got for, I think, 15 bucks, 10 bucks. And I went, why did someone upgrade an AC router? Either they just got rid of it, maybe they sold their house and they got rid of it and they had another house, but it was kind of shocking to me to find that one. It was a really nice device. It still really is. That's one I'm using. I'm thinking someone went out, bought the latest and greatest AX or a mesh or something of that sort, and they decided to get rid of that one. So it raised a question in my mind of why someone did that. They weren't informed enough to know the difference between the two, or they have a lot of money and they went out and just bought all new everything so that it's Wi-Fi 6 capable. Leads me to Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 is the new cutting edge technology that's out there. There's pros and there's cons to this. Still, Wi-Fi 6 is a device that is basically a smarter device than your traditional router. Basically, you have the same issues that it can basically communicate once at a time. This now has channel set up in that communication so it can actually broadcast out to multiple devices. So, if you're communicating, let's start with 2.4 gigabit or 4.2 bandwidth. I don't know a lot about Wi-Fi 6 if it communicates that way or if it's only the 5.0. So if you're using the 5.0 and it communicates out and it sends out on channel 37 or is it 36, sends out, they can send out 3 signals or 4 signals where your devices are actually set up so that when it communicates to that router on that channel, it actually has like lanes. It says, okay, I'm communicating on channel 36 to this router on channel or lane 2, where your other device over here might be communicating on channel 6 or channel 12, or just give you numbers, 38, whatever channels it dedicates. Why that's weird is because with Wi-Fi, it can only communicate to devices and only listen one time. So if you have a bunch of routers talking at the same time on the same channel, this one talks, and then this one talks, and then this one talks, and then this one talks, and they take turns. They don't all broadcast at the same time. So that's another reason why they tell you make sure you don't have your router on a channel that has a lot of other routers, because it's waiting for the airtime. It's waiting to communicate. So that's another huge factor. I know I brought that up before. I'll go into more detail on this, but that's a huge factor to communication with your router. That's why there's software out there and things out there where you can scan your communication channel to know how many devices are on that channel, who's broadcasting on that channel. Maybe you need to change the channel to 56 or 180 or whatever is available that someone else isn't using. That's all critically important. That's all configurations. That's all important stuff to do when you get into your Wi-Fi setups. But knowing these things and knowing how it's done, going back to the part of versus the 2.4 versus 5, the only real versus is the difference is the channel numbers. With the 2.4, you really only have about 3 channels that you can set on without them starting to walk on each other. That's something that they've figured out in the last few years, where before they used to tell you, oh, you could use all these channels and all this stuff, and now they figure out that when it broadcasts out, it's actually using the other channels next to it. So now things have changed on that. Same with the 5. Depending on how much bandwidth, if it's the 20 or 40 or 60 broadcasts that you do, most things will be using the 20 where it uses a single channel. But if you change the hertz and stuff on there, it'll use multiple channels. So that's another factor why you need to know what everybody else is using around you. Some people will use up the much bandwidth as they possibly can just because they can. It's not really necessary, especially with the speeds and the technology that they have nowadays, that, you know, every home user should be fine with the standard settings, the default settings. Just you pick a channel that really nobody's using. So you're okay. Even for most businesses, you should be fine. I can't possibly think of a scenario in my head that I've dealt with where I've had to use a different frequency and different stuff to get better speeds and get better stuff and all of that. I've not had that yet. Most of the time you put in an access point, you put in other things, repeaters and other things, and you're good. And you move on. A lot of that's covered. I've shown hardware and all of that stuff. So go back and watch all those videos. So I just wanted to touch on this because I always see this worded as versus. It's not really a versus, because if you have older devices and you go out and buy an N router that supports, or a G router that supports 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, you actually end up using both of those frequencies. So it's not really a versus. It's not like you have to choose only this or only that. Not like you go out and buy a separate one for this frequency and a separate one for that frequency. But it goes back to the last video I did. You may want to do that because of the subject I just brought up. The device can only communicate to one thing at a time. Depending on how heavy of a usage and how much you use it, you may want to actually do that. Might want to put up 2 separate routers. One for 2.4, one for 5. Most people don't do it because they don't have that much bandwidth usage. There's not that many users on it. You might have a lot of devices on there. TVs, webcams, your computer, your phone. But how many are actually being used to stream data and transfer data at the same time? That's the key part. You know, I have that router. I have a mesh network. So technically, I have 2 different networks. So I mentioned it in another video. If I want to upload something, or if I want to do something that's dedicated where nothing else will bother that, I can jump on the other network and download. Comes back to the only true other problem between 2.4 and 5 is distance. 2.4 will travel a further distance than the 5. So that's one of the other little factors that you might need to consider. That's one of the factors why I don't really recommend having 2 separate devices. But now that boils down to is, how are you using it and where are you using it? So as you can see, I have a dedicated space for my workspace, my videos, my tech space, when I troubleshoot computers, all this stuff I have a dedicated space. Now, there would be nothing wrong with me putting a router here that's a 5G router, 5 gig for this area. If I wanted to, I could dedicate that. It's a small enough space. But that goes back to having the multiple devices and the multiple setups and having your architecture of your network designed and all of that stuff. Go watch those videos. So this is where I get into a lot of questions of when I see these videos, I kind of giggle and I laugh because they kind of make it sound so simple. And this is why I started the channel, because they make it sound so simple. Oh, just simply do this and this and this and you're fine. But there's scenarios that come up. There's things that come up. Go read comments on these things. You'll see people, oh, well, how do I do this? And how do I do that? And how do I do this? And because they make it sound so simple that it's just so simple to do it. It actually is very simple. But the problem is they don't tell you any of these factors. So these are some of the factors I wanted to cover. I know I'm probably rambling on about a lot of stuff, jumping around, but if you watched a lot of my videos, you can kind of follow along. If you don't understand, hopefully I have a video you can go back and see to explain more on exactly what I'm talking about, because that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to give you the whole subject. The whole 102 is the whole lump of how everything works together. The 101s would be how that piece works, how this piece works, how that piece works, how this piece works, how that piece works. But they're still together. As I stated earlier, all these other videos all tie into this. So I'm trying to get this point across that there is no versus. You can actually buy one device that has both of those in there. Where the future's going to lead, who knows? Possibly, 7 or 8, they'll have more frequencies out there. As soon as they can figure out what a good frequency is, I'm sure they're going to adopt it. I'm sure they're going to bring it in. So this is why I wanted to touch on this, because everything sort of has been backwards compatible. There was A and B that were not compatible. Nowadays, because of the 5G, they're compatible. Most, I think, A's will talk to the 5G network, but there wasn't a lot of A technology. A technology was kind of, I think, designed for business structures, but everybody went with the standard platform of B. Oh, excuse me. Because they knew it was interchangeable with anything. They didn't want to go with pretty much a proprietary thing that they knew there was a small market for. They went with the big market. They went with the standard thing. So that's, one of the factors you might want to consider too when you're looking at some of this. Right now, there's all kinds of standards in the pipeline. If you go online and look, you'll see there's A like J, AH, AK, AM, AN. There's all kinds of things they have in the pipeline that they're trying that aren't officially a standard. I wouldn't recommend anybody running out buying any of that stuff unless there's some really unique, cool feature that you just have to have on that router. But you got to understand that most of your devices probably will not be the same capable, same device, because usually it has to become a standard before everybody starts adopting it to TVs, to phones, to a lot of things. But it might be able to work with those other bandwidths. So that's one of the other key factors I wanted to bring up, because you might go out to one of these places and find one of these weird standards out there. Maybe someone bought an AM. And then they realized, well, this ain't working. This don't work with this, and this don't work with that. So they went out and bought the new Wi-Fi 6, and they shipped that one off. So that's just one of the other points I wanted to bring up, because I thought of there's always a possibility. There's some things I've run across in thrift stores that I'm like, hey, this is kind of cool, but how would you actually use this? How would you use this? Why would you use this? You know, the old Verizon wireless signal boosters that you plug into your wired network, and it uses your wired network for their cell phone network. They were selling those for a long time for areas that weren't getting the wireless signal. Well, there's pros and cons to that. Now, yeah, you might get cell phone signal in an area you don't get cell phone signal, but it's using your network. So anybody that does anything funky on that network through their phone is actually going out on your IP. So that's a big security issue. So there's some factors out there that are cool that you can find. So that brought up that subject of making sure I mention this, because if you don't have a true official standard, you're probably not going to find anything that's matchable with it. But if that product will work with the official standard products, and you go into a thrift store and someone's got it for $5 and it's going to work with Wi-Fi 6 and has all the same supports as Wi-Fi 6, or, you know, N or G or something that is capable of what you need, it might be a killer deal for you. So I don't want to say don't do that, don't do this, but you know, it's something that you might run across. You might get home and go, oh man, this is some weird thing that I don't know. So this is why I'm bringing this up. I've seen them out there. You know, why someone actually bought it, I don't know, but they gave it away. I've seen them floating around. I haven't bought them because I didn't need them. I was looking for very precise things when I was looking. So that's one of the factors I wanted to bring up. And it's always something that is probably going to be around for a long, long time. Even once I'm long and gone, you know, 30 years, 100 years from now, that people will watch this and wonder, you know, oh, most of this stuff will not probably ever go away. It'll change, it'll evolve, and it'll be better. That's why a lot of my videos, they said if you don't know where this stuff came from, it's going to be hard to know where it's going. So that's why I mentioned do your homework, research it, figure it out. But if you see a good deal, snatch it up and then go home, research it. It might actually work out very well for you. It just didn't work for the last person. But everybody's scenarios are different. And if you know what your network layout is and you know how things go, you're okay. But as for Wi-Fi, you want to make sure you have all your security. You want to make sure you have the security key when you join the network. You want to make sure you have all these things. So as long as you have all of these things in your devices and you know what your internet speed is, because right now I see a lot, when I traveled, a lot of different speeds. People have 300 meg standard, 400 meg standard. Out here, the one I have is 100 meg standard. You can go up, but there's other companies out here that barely even offer you 10 megs. So that's where the variable is. It's still today in a decent sized town, in a decent sized place, in a nice state or whatever, that it's hard to say hey, you only have a Wi-Fi B and you're running at 10 meg connection, you need to go out and buy another one. Because if you're in a rural area or you're in some other place, you might still be even on dial-up because you don't have the high-speed capabilities because you're out too far and you got to be centralized near one of those units. So this is one of the factors I always brought up is what is your internet speed? Yes, if you're going to share stuff on your network, yeah, you probably want to go with a nicer, faster network speed. But if you're using a slow network and you're using slow connection speeds and you're using a lot of other things that are still kind of older because of scenarios and situations where you can't get the speed, it's not a bad thing. But you might go into town and you might go into a secondhand store, a thrift store, you know, any kind of a store, even an electronic store, somewhere where they might have something on sale, a closeout, you know, those things you might want to look at because, like I said, instead of paying hundreds of dollars, you might get it for $10 or $15, $30, you know. You might get a brand new closed out model of something for $30 instead of $300. Those are always options that are out there that, you know, if you run across it, you pretty much have to get it when you run across it because the next person behind you that realizes that is going to get it. And what was really funny is I've done this just to see if people would do it, and they do, is when I'm in the thrift store, oh, this is really cool, this is a really good price, let me think about it, and I put it back on the shelf to set it down. Person right next to me, boom, takes it. What I was talking to out loud about was not even a good product. He heard me say, oh, this is cool, this is awesome, maybe I'll consider getting this. So he took it. Because he didn't know what it was, or how it was even used, or anything. But he took it. I think I mentioned that in the video too before. So, if you see it, odds are next time you go back, it won't be there. Because possibly it could be someone that seen you pick it up and go, oh, hey, this is, you know, Wi-Fi 6 or this is AC. Oh, I'll have to think about it. And as soon as you put it back, I bet you someone will run right over there and grab it. I've seen it several times. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. You know, especially if it's something really cheap. If you go into a store and it's a $10 router, $5 router, or whatever, snatch it up. Yeah, you take the risk of maybe it doesn't work or it's missing a power supply or something of that sort. Most places will, most of them, a lot of them, will put a tag on there. Tested, it works, or unknown, sold as is. You know, things like that. If they mark tested, works, and they got it for $10 or whatever, that's a killer deal. Two I have up here, I bought at thrift stores. Or that one I bought, and this one I bought at a thrift store. This monitor's great. I love it. So, just small little factors I wanted to point out. I know I mentioned the thrift store thing before, I think in the last video with the Wi-Fi and all of that. But if you're watching them as a collection, I know I'm probably rambling on a lot in the collection of the 2 videos so far, or 3 that I've done. So, I know I mentioned it a lot, but I really want to make sure people understand the differences. I know I've covered a lot. Might have missed a few things. Maybe you need some more explanations, but I'm sure I'm going to cover a lot of it. So again, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, leave comments. If you need to know more about some stuff, leave it down below. I'll do more videos, I'll explain more. Like I said, I do pieces, I do the whole workout so that people understand. Other factor with the Wi-Fi. Sure, I mentioned it on my last one. Some solar panels, some solar companies and other things now want to use your Wi-Fi to communicate out. So when you buy newer products and you buy newer stuff in your home, you may need to upgrade your wireless due to that. You might not have the internet speed to support it, but if you find something again at a thrift store or somewhere else, secondhand at a good price, it can really make it worth it. So, I know I've gone on real long for this video. I think I'm going to wrap this one up. But hopefully I've covered a lot. Hopefully I've explained a lot. Hopefully everybody understood where I'm trying to get at with this, so that everybody understands how the Wi-Fi and how 2.4 and 5 is not a versus. They actually work together. You use them together. The same device, but the frequencies, the speeds are different. The distances are different. There's a lot of factors that are different between these two. But if you have a 5 gigahertz, 5 network device, most of them support the 2.4. So once you get out of range of the 1, it'll ramp down to the 2.4 and you can still get your internet. And by range, I mean distance. 2.4 does travel further. So that's one of the factors you want to know. Mesh networks. Look at them. A lot of the mesh networks, how they communicate to each other is the kicker. How do they communicate? What bandwidth do they communicate? You know, all these other things that are out there. You want to kind of do your homework. Hopefully from these videos you'll understand. From watching these and then you go to do your homework, you'll be able to understand what they're trying to tell you. Because they'll sum it up in 2 sentences or 3 sentences. There's going to be a lot of technical little things in those 2 or 3 sentences. So, like I said, that's kind of what makes this field a little technically hard, is there's so many different categories to one thing. It's not that it's a hard field. It's not hard to do at home. It's just knowing what someone's talking about when they get into, you know, setting up your security keys, your Wi-Fi key, your login, your admin password, your securities, all these things. It can be a little overwhelming because it's all together where you read it and you go, oh wow, I got to do all of this, but it's really not that hard. You'll watch these videos and you'll go, oh, I get what he's talking about. I see what he's doing. I understand it. That's the point. Is so when you read those 3 little lines on the paper that tells you, you need to log in, you need to do this, you need to change your password, you need to change the default password, you need to put in your Wi-Fi name, you need to put in the security key, you need to put in this, you need to, you know, some of it gets more technical depending on your network. If your router, modem / whatever is all one unit, how it gets the internet, your DHCP, your IP ranges, all of this stuff can get a little bit more technical. But the problem is they put it so close together they don't break it down for you. I have to break it down. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for watching.